Hi everyone, I'm your host Amartya Singh, co-founder and CEO of Inflow, a product built by and for modern finance teams. Welcome to the 13th episode of Inside the CFO Office, a dedicated space where we dive deep into the journeys of top finance leaders, the challenges they have overcome, and how they see the future of finance. In today's episode, we focus on the fine balance of a CFO between finance and operations. I'm excited to host Alexander J. Freeman, a seasonal global finance leader with extensive experience across emerging markets and the US. Alex has held leadership roles at some of the world's most respected organizations like American Express, Visa, Dell, HID Global, and Diebold. Currently, Alex serves as the CFO at Wursta. Alex brings along a unique blend of expertise in controllership, sales operations, and strategic finance. He's known for building high performance teams and leading large scale performance improvements. And he's led business teams from New York to Moscow and Austin to Dubai. So, in today's episode, we explore his leadership journey, his evolving expectations on finance and operations. So, let's get started.
I'm doing
Welcome,
great.
Alex. How are you doing today?
Beautiful Friday morning here in Austin, Texas. Thank you for having me, Amartya. It's super exciting. I'm glad to have this conversation and sort of give back to the community. I'm excited for our chat. Let's take it away.
Perfect. So let's get started with the first question. Alex, your journey has taken you from risk management and controllership roles to leading finance as a CFO. So what were some of the most defining moments in those journeys and how did these chapters prepare
Well,
you
look,
for your
I
current
think the
role?
most defining moment for me, and I think I would call it advice that I would give, is that don't close any doors, right? So my first experience was when something like this. I was at my second year at Purdue University, MBA in finance there, and I got invited by Citigroup to fly to Orlando for a recruitment conference. I talked to my mentor and I said, I don't know if I want to do this or not paying for the ticket and the hotel. And they said they're interested to have the chat, but they're not covering the cost. And my mentor said, what's it going to cost you to fly from Chicago to Orlando? And I said, I think the cheapest Southwest, $49. And he said, well, hotel, how much? I said, maybe 150 for the 2 days. He said, you have to do it, right? It's an investment. This isn't, a mom and pop shop down the street. It's Citigroup. They invited you. You need to go. I went, they hired me, and the rest is history, right? So my first role, I had an opportunity to go work in New York, London, or Moscow. I'm originally from the USSR, so I decided Moscow was the way. I needed to brush up on my Russian, and I was super excited about, that part of that region's development. Um, it's some sales ops roles. The role in the very beginning, I had a lot of credit risk management experience via Citigroup. And I feel like every single role that I've been at has taken me into the next role. So effectively, it's a ladder. Sometimes it's a ladder, and sometimes it's just a pathway, a horizontal pathway. And my advice or my direction there would be don't say no to conversations. You can say no to distractions after you decide that they're a distraction, but don't close any doors. Keep all doors open, keep all streets green, and keep moving forward. Sometimes it has to be selfish, plot your course, which I didn't always do. Sometimes I kind of rambled into a situation and, go back to the resources that you have, whether it's your family or friends or your mentors, or if you're reading books that tell you how to act and what to do next. You have to put all of those things together like a giant puzzle and make that be your life.
Got it. I think one thing you mentioned was really nice, and I also believe in that philosophy, right? When we are working across a career path, right? It's always a preparation for the next role. And I also believe, from a personal career trajectory, this is my philosophy. I believe that, whatever designation that you want to grow into, you're already, eligible for that. And that's when you get things, you're already ready. If I want to become a director, right? I'm already functioning like a director to become a director, and that's how I believe. You're preparing for the next journey, preparing for the
Absolutely.
next round of growth.
It's a CFO may have 10 things that they need to do fundamentally, right? So, as I was doing
Yeah,
accounting and controllership, checking the box there, as I was doing operations, as I was working with the business to drive revenue, improve margins, checking the box on that, international dealings, taxes, compliance, all of these things I've done on an individual basis at most of the firms that I've been at. And then you
Right.
just have to put it all together.
Right. It makes a lot of sense, and I love that experience about taking that plunge. You always have doubts, right? Sometimes it's good that you took that plunge, you took that decision, because sometimes what happens is we look at short term decisions, and these short term makes such a lot of impact on our own mind. They look really big, but it's good that you consulted your mentor, your professor, whoever, your advisors throughout your career, who have actually led you, especially with that decision, to actually go out and see the world. I think that
Absolutely.
makes a lot of difference. And I think from the perspective of the other aspects that you mentioned, always saying yes to conversations, always being open to discussion, that's really, really important, because you never know what can happen out of that conversation. So it's very, very important. Sometimes what happens is that, we get overwhelmed with other things in our life or the work that we are doing. It's very important to have that ability to, say, okay, let's talk about it and let's figure it. It's yes, it's a yes, it's a no, it's a no. But I like that, approach as well from your side. Right. So let's move to
Sure.
the next
I
question.
would add,
So let's talk about your experience at Wursta. So, and would love to know about it. How has it been leading finance, such a fast evolving company, and what would you believe have been the two biggest challenges that you have
Um,
faced?
I don't know if I would call them challenges, but I would say the following, right? I entered Wursta in a transitional moment for Wursta. So Wursta was going from sort of a startup-y, Matt Wursta is the CEO founder. He built a company in his parents' garage, literally, like, the success story of the US entrepreneur. And now we have the revenues pretty high. I don't want to put the number out there, but then you've got to have the people to go and manage it, right? It all always goes back to the people. No matter how far we extend into the space of technology, it's always the people, right? So one of the things that needed to happen is that we needed to mature the organization. And first and foremost, we needed to mature the finance organization. We do a lot of professional services. We wanted to go from QuickBooks to NetSuite. So that meant we need to bring someone that has experience in that. Brought in a very strong controller from a professional services company. Costs were something that we were worried about. So I nearshored two individuals, one to fill an FP&A space, and the other one is really to run all of our Latin American accounting and operations and finance. And then there is close that needs to be happening. We need to get back to our banking partners. We need to get back to some of our larger customers. We have to have our financials in order. So that meant a staff accountant, somebody that helps us with the day to day collections, close, and all of that. Now, we've done such a good job that some of the other teams are coming to us and saying, "Hey, can you help us with this? What do you think about that? Break the revenue down by these customers." We're doing some of the things that would normally be in the sales operations space, right? So the fact that I did have sales operations experience at HID Global, thanks to them, allowed me to do some of the things that potentially other finance professionals would not be able to do. We put a sales comp plan together. We do a much better job driving our pipeline. I run the global sales forecast. So it's people, right? So number one, its challenges can be solved by strong hires. And so, hire slow, fire fast is the motto. And then you've got to give people the resources. So I would say really that's number one. Number two, and I wasn't good at this, and I don't, it's probably a lot of room for growth as well, but influencing the commercial team, influencing the operations team, right? The team that is actually customer facing, the people that are actually driving our revenue. The only reason I have a job is because somebody out there is selling stuff, selling products to our customers. And so it's three things there. Number one, you have to understand the business. What the heck are we doing in this space, and how can we do better? Number two is you have to build relationships with all of the individuals that are driving revenue for us, that are driving these relationships. And then number three, you have to understand the interplay between operations and finance, and how pressing a button on the operations side pushes a lever on the finance side. Same thing going the other way. So again, to summarize, two things: got to have strong people, and number two is you have to influence the commercial team.
Got it. I think the team aspect is really important because as you rightly said, there are different kind of problems that you're facing, right? Or spaces where there can be a lot more improvements. We spoke about requirement of a controller. We spoke about an FP&A person to look at the cost and plan it out better. You had a specific finance person to look at Latin America, the customers, the relationships that were there. You got in a staff accountant. It's very important. What happens is that CFO's perspective, like you, it's important to have a well-rounded team because everybody fulfills a particular role. And I also get the point that you mentioned that you did some things right, and that's where the teams came on to you and asked for guidance. So that was a brilliant thing, and it was a great thing to see that kind of a start, because as you rightly said, the firm was in a startupish nature, and for it to be become like a more mature organization, typically it's, and not typically, but it's a requirement, it's the need is to have a great CFO who can guide to say that hey, this is the problem, hence we need to do this. It needs to be a step by step approach towards
That's
getting
right.
that kind
It's
of
a step by
maturity.
step approach, but they're actually, it's not a ladder. It's, think of it as the Colosseum, right?
Yeah.
And there are many paths to the top, and you could take one of them or you could take all of them, but the goal is up there, and that's what we're striving to get.
Got it. Great answer. So let's move to the next question. I think this is the topic that we were speaking about, the role of finance and operations, right? And you have operated, and you also mentioned how you have worked in operations, and that's a very interesting point that you mentioned. And I wanted to speak about it in this question because this is all about that. You mentioned that by click of a button or by performing a simple function, how can the finance and operations be linked? Because operations in general is called operations because it's not very easy to tame it, right, or to put a process, right? And when you combine finance and operation, it becomes really complicated. You have operated at the intersection of finance and operations, right? How have you balanced these two areas, and how do you think a deep understanding of operations helps a finance
You
team?
know, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's, you have to learn the business. And to learn the business, you have to spend time with the operations leaders. You know, a lot of folks in finance will say, will define operations as FinOps. You know, these are things related to numbers, processes, procedures, and they are finance based in scope, which is not the case, right? There are different types of operations across the company, and companies that are centered in marketing, for example, Amex, right? Everyone knows the American Express brand. They are marketing operations centric. There are companies that are centered around numbers. Like Dell is a very numbers driven organization. So it's more of a FinOps situation. There are companies like Amazon that are logistical operations machines. So you have to identify the levers that drive the company and spend as much time with the leaders for those operations engines as you possibly can, right? And as numbers come through on a monthly basis, as you do your monthly close and as you're learning the business, you have to go and say, what's the biggest driver of my P&L? Okay. Which people are related to this driver? Great. Let's speak to them. It's a monthly, it's a weekly. We're having a dialogue all the time. And as the P&L progresses, as we close every single month, you're learning, they're learning, and you're now making 1 + 1 = 3. So, what I would say here is that we can't define operations through the dictionary, right? There's not like some standard operations definition. Operations is everything around you in a company, and you have to understand the most important things that drive the numbers. It's not linear, it's a very complex system, and you have to cultivate it on a daily basis.
Got it. Brilliant answer. I think two major takeaways. I love the example that you gave on Amex marketing operation. Dell is finance
Dell,
operation,
you know,
FinOps,
you
right?
sell computers and storage and servers, but Michael Dell
Yeah,
is a numbers driven person, and it's always toned from the top, right? So if he's talking about
yeah.
numbers, everyone else has to. So if you look at even some of the Dell sales leaders could be finance directors and CFOs at other companies. They are so number centric.
Got it. Great, I think, and that also helps in the terms of the finance leaders as well, because when you have sales guys who understand numbers, your life becomes much more easier in terms of projecting what you're wanting to do, planning your cash flows, planning your budget, knowing where the growth forecasts are headed towards, having a proper ARR target. And I think I also love the answer that, I mean, this is not very well spoken about, but I think operations, the rise in operation, or the increase in complexity of operations, or how to solve your day-to-day work or day-to-day life, I think the linearity is not there. It is non-linear. It is exponential, if I may call it, and that's where the complication comes in, because at some points of time you cannot predict it. You're growing as a company, and I believe that operations need to put in efforts to grow with the growth of the company, right? And that, I think, is not very
It's
easy to
not
do,
easy to
right?
do. You have to look out for Murphy's Law, right? If anything can go wrong, it will definitely go wrong. And by the way, it will go wrong at the most
Right.
unexpected time and from the most unexpected direction. So you can't wake up in the morning and say, well, today's going to be just like yesterday. It's not. It's going to be different. And you have to think about how tomorrow will be different from today and what paths,
Yeah.
to try. We can't control everything, but to at least try to consider if then scenarios. If this happens, then we're going to go do that. If we lose this customer, then we have this other backstop. If we lose this financial relationship, then we have somebody else to go to and to get the funds. So it's a daily exercise. You can't rest on your laurels. You can't relax. You have to do the thing every single day.
Right. Right, no, totally agreed. From my personal experience, also, I mean, while we are at FinFlow, we also keep on changing. Such a lot of things. It's so dynamic. Things are changing. The entire, I'm sure you must have seen the world of finance is changing. So hence, our solutioning, whatever we build products for the companies, are also changing. And I think that's where the beauty or the magic of working in a fastly changing environment is. It's so challenging. You cannot be complacent. You need to always plan ahead, and sometimes the planning is not enough, and then you take a step back and say,
That's
what do I
right.
need to do next to handle this?
And again, it always goes back to people. I'm sure you have a very strong team and people, information,
Yeah.
relationships. This is what drives success in business.
Yeah. Right, people are important. I mean, this side or the other side, I mean, I'm sure people at your company are important. Having good people at your customers end is important. Having good people at your vendor side is important. Having good people at the banks is important. I mean, that's what makes a company really, really a
100%.
superlative company.
And I want to be very careful here. I don't want to say that there are people that are important and there are people that are not important. There are people that
Right.
are perfect for a particular role at a particular time. There are people that are perfect for a particular company in a particular function.
Right.
So this is the job of a leader,
Right.
is to make sure that the person you're bringing into the company is the right one, right? Because if
Right.
you didn't, in 6 months, 12 months down the road, that person is out of a job, you have actually failed the person. Like, the person that is not the person that came into the company, it's the person that's staring at you in the mirror.
Right. No, fair point. Great answer. So let's move to the next question. I mean, obviously, the priorities keep on changing as a CFO, right? And there's so many things to worry about, right? And already spoke about such a lot of things that, man, and that macro changes, things changes. You look at the tariff, the tariff changes that happened. That has impacted so many industries across the ecosystem, right? So, what do you believe? What are the top three priority areas that you believe helps you make yourself
As
future ready?
finance or just as a human being?
So I think, I mean, we can take it as a finance, and if there is anything from a personal human being, we'd also love to
So
hear
for
that as
for
well.
finance, right? And I focus so much on the non-finance stuff throughout this conversation, and I have to go back and
Yeah.
just say, you have to know the balance sheet, you have to know the P&L, you have to know the cash statement, you have to understand the general ledger, you have to know accounting, risk management's key, compliance is key, taxation is important. um, Understanding the business would be the second most important thing. So again, you have to do, as we say here in the U.S., the blocking and tackling, right? to the National Football League. I know it's soccer, football, whatever it is, but the blocking and tackling are the basics of playing football in the US. So you have to do finance well. You have to know the numbers. The second thing is you have to then know how those numbers are related to the commercial side of the house, to operations. So you have to understand the business, right? Number two. And three, you have to be able to work with people. You have to figure out a way to get to a yes. If we've decided that this is the right thing to do, then we have to figure out how do we get to this thing. We have to compromise. You have to be a diplomat. You have to be a politician, and sometimes not, right? Sometimes you have to be willing to disrupt the water a little bit, right? To, they say, ruffle the grass to catch a snake, right? So you have to be a little disruptive sometimes, and you can't, a lot of finance, we're introverts, right? So we'll sit in the back of the room, we'll have really good ideas, but we're afraid to talk about them, and you have to be outspoken. As a finance leader, you've got to take charge. This is the new way for finance, and you have to be willing to take some risks.
Got it. Well, lovely answers, very in depth, knowing the base fundamentals as a finance person, knowing your balance sheet, cash flow statements, P&L, general ledger. So these are the basics. I believe what the three pointers that you mentioned, they stay true blue and they stay important throughout the life cycle in whatever macros you are in, whatever economic situation that we are in. I think these are always everlasting. Knowing your fundamentals, understanding businesses. I'm sure you have worked across so many industries, right? You have worked in fintech, you have worked in tech, you have worked in hardware. Like, I mean, all the businesses are pretty much different. So I'll also like to get a little bit more into this. You mentioned about understanding businesses, right? I mean, obviously it's not that easy, right? Because what it's a general tendency of people to apply what they learn into other careers, right? Into whatever they do in the future, right? But you have seen a lot of different kinds of industries. So how was that experience? Was it very challenging, or was it like it became a second game to second skin to actually handle it, or how did you handle so many different
I
industries?
think it goes back to realizing that the most important component of the business, after the resources, human beings inside of it, is a customer. You're ultimately serving another human being or another entity outside of yourself, outside of your firm. And you have to understand why they're buying your product. Why are they even having a conversation with you? Because as soon as you understand that, you're able to adjust a lot of your policies and procedures to match client desires in a legal and compliant way. By the way, this is something that there are no shortcuts, right? You have to be compliant with regulations, you
Yeah.
have to be compliant with the laws. But after that, how do we move the Rubik's Cube to present the right color, so to speak, in front of the customers that we're facing? So, for every single business, for every single industry, you have to understand why they're buying your product. And as soon as you understand why they're buying your product, you can adjust the back end to make sure that that continues and to make sure that they buy more. For example, right, it could be that they would buy your product if not for the payment terms. So you might loosen up the payment terms a little bit. You might add on the margin a little bit over the period of a year, but then you give them, I don't know, 60 days as opposed to 30 days, right? You might, like we did this at Dell, right? There's a lot of competition globally for the notebook and the monitor space. We would sometimes take the margin on
Yeah.
monitors to zero, have a 5% margin on
Right.
notebooks, and have really nice margins on storage and servers to make up for that, right? And
Right.
um, I'd say the final thing on this is there's always somebody behind the customer. Someone's always making the decision. So
Yeah.
it's procurement or it's someone just like you in finance, right? So you have
Yeah.
to help
Right.
the buyer, the customer, tell the story, have to help them make it make sense
Yeah.
inside of the company. And you might even do, you might even run a financial model. You might run a presentation deck so they can sell your product internally. They are your biggest proponent.
Got it. Great. Love the answer. Thanks, Alex. So we'll move to the next question. Right. So I think this is one of my favorite sections. we have always been focused on CFO tech. We see the entire CFO tech really evolving. ERPs, or in today's world, AI, and there are so many different softwares that have come in, and connectivity issues, integration issues, and there are so many things. So, would love to know, how do you view the current state of where ERPs are, and as well as other technologies in the CFO stack, and what gaps or challenges that you believe that can be need to be addressed or can be addressed better?
So, just like in everything else, I don't know if you call it in product space or category space, I'm not sure what the technical term for this is. Whenever there are technological leaps in products, things tend to spring up. You won't believe how many accounts payable applications I have looked at or received emails from. Accounts receivables, corporate card, ERPs. So, what I would say is that they're entirely too many. And over the next, say, 18 to 36 months, I don't know, 25% of them will go away, then another 25% will go away, and we'll settle back down into what we saw over the past, 2 or 3 decades, which is SAP, Oracle, right? Those are the two major ones. For mid, it's been
Yeah,
NetSuite and Sage, and we'll see something very similar. I do believe that unless these incumbents are able to innovate or purchase companies, and then once you purchase, you have to integrate really well, they're going to be challenged in a
yeah,
major way. So, what I would encourage any finance professional, any decision maker to do is to not rush into it. Don't rush into it. Make sure that you need what you think you need. And just to give you an example, there was a company I worked for. We ran sales compensation for that for the team. It was a huge operation. We did it all out of Excel. So over a period of 2 years, I looked at 3 or 4 different options, right? Different applications. And at the end of all of that, we said no to all of them. We're going to continue running it in Excel because what Excel allowed us to do, as long as we
right,
had very strong Excel professionals, which we did, is we were extremely flexible. We could design a plan today,
right,
implement it 2 weeks from then, and then have it run for 3 months, shut it back down, and have a new plan in place.
yeah,
We couldn't do that with a lot of the applications that were being sold to us, either because we didn't have an administrator on site or because we needed to pay some
yeah,
professional services team from that company, and it just didn't make sense. So a lot of times we think that technologies, you just press a button and it solves all our problems. It doesn't. And it actually complicates things because as soon as you start on the implementation journey, out of 100 units of resource, you might need to put 20 or 30 units of a finance resource on that implementation. Guess what? They're not able to do some of the other potentially more important things. Now, someone might say, well, sure, you'll get it's an investment up front, but then the application will pay for itself. And this is where I say you got to make sure
yeah,
that it does pay for itself. And all of that decisioning happens on the front end. It doesn't happen in the middle, it doesn't happen at the end. You can't go back in time. So, whatever you decide to buy, make 99% sure that you actually need it.
yeah. That's a great point, and I have also personally seen that. I mean, when we are working with our clients and with customers and finance leaders, I think one thing what you rightly mentioned is that everything does not happen with a button click. Implementations have some aspects which needs to be taken care of, and over a point of time, also what you mentioned, don't rush into software. That's very important, because what we have also seen is that there are so many software which finance leaders are using. It's very important to have the right set of softwares and also have the right connectivity between softwares. If each software works in silos and there are no connectivity, what happens is that data progression which needs to be happening between different software just fails, right? So love, I mean, agreed with your point about not rushing into any kind of product and doing the proper ROI analysis. And other thing is, I also agree with the professional services team. And as a company, we also, seem to make that product as easily integrable as there should be as less as services angle on it, because that creates a dependency, and there's always challenges in having dependency, because if you're not able to solve it, you will depending on the specific vendor who can provide that, and there is a certain level of time they will need time to understand your requirements. So I also completely agree that there should be less dependency on professional services. Some cases it might still need professional services or consulting, but the focus should be to make it as less dependence driven as possible. It should be as seamless as possible. Right, and I mean also the aspect of seeing what kind of resources needs to be put, and that's a very big decision, right? So the entire point of going into the software is that you want to save your team's bandwidth or team's time, right? And sometimes you just put in that kind of efforts into developing, implementing that product, and if the results don't come, and it's a loss, the efforts are gone into something. And also I understand where you came from when you said that, hey, it's an investment of effort, but it's also the onus resides on finance leaders to actually come up with the right kind of a balance between ROI and understanding what kind of efforts are there, right? And now from our experience also, we have seen that we have also incorporated an element where we say that, hey, don't, I mean, if somebody wants to use a product, we have a specific thing we call FinFlow Advantage. And it's very interesting. What we do is that we implement it and we build it on a base integration, very minimal integration, and we don't charge anything upfront. We say, hey, these are the KRAs, these are the metrics. If we meet it at the end of the month, only then, if you're happy, then you'll go ahead with that. So that's to decrease the kind of ROI, and people can just go ahead and experiment and try it out the product and see the metrics, and that makes a lot of sense instead of putting in a implementation fees, putting in X fees, putting in Y fees. I think that's what we have also started. We have been doing to handle that
It's
kind of
very important. And
issues.
something you said, I think I have to accent. Wanted to make a recommendation to always look at demos with your own company's data, because a lot of times you'll get this beautiful
Very important.
presentation and it's magical and you press buttons and just, it's but it's not like that, right? Because as soon as you start putting your own data in there, it's completely different. And what you guys are doing is
Yeah,
commendable, because if you're doing a sort of a straw man, a working demo environment, I should say, that's the way to go. Because then the customer can start playing with the engine and they can say, this thing doesn't work, that doesn't work, this could be better.
yeah.
And then you guys get to iterate on that. So that's awesome.
Right, I completely agreed. Demoing own data is very important because industry also changes, right? We spoke about the payables problem statement, right? It's not that it's same across different industries, right? There are different kinds of vendors. There are enterprise vendors. There are SMB vendors. There are different payment schedules. It's not that straightforward. You can't just pick and choose and just fit it over there, right? So I agree with having your own data and having demos on the own data makes a lot of sense. Right. I think,
Sure.
can we move to the next question? Sure. Great. I think we touched a little bit. We touched a little bit on it. Would like to also cover a little bit on the AI aspect, right? And AI has have been a lot of things on that have been people are talking about AI. AI is really active in the developer in the engineering side. For example, cursors of the world, GitHubs of the world are really doing a great job over there. In sales also, sales and marketing as well. There are multiple aspects of how can you create the right set of prompt, a marketing prompt, how can you create a right design, how can you do your website better. So there's a lot of things are happening over there. From the finance side also, there are some things are happening like AI for general ledger entry. How can you use the LLM to understand and communicate it better? So there are some things are happening over there, but what has been your take from the ground zero?
Yeah,
What is your
several
take on
things on
this?
this, right? We are at ground zero of AI development because we are a Google reseller. So Gemini is a big selling point for us. I use Gemini on a daily basis. Everyone in the
Nice.
company uses Gemini on a daily basis. We use the foundation that Google is selling to then go to the customers and upgrade their experience. And not only that, the other thing that we do
Right.
is we're working to improve the agentic AI space, and we are making
Right.
recommendations to various customers on how they can leverage AI on a daily basis. Now, our
Right.
approach doesn't come from a finance mindset, right? So everyone's learning, right? I'm learning. There are some people that are much more advanced than me at the company. There are some people that are less advanced, but it's all a learning journey for us. We were on an executive leadership team call the other day, and we sort of said, how can we start doing things? How can we start using it more widely at the company itself. And I volunteered and I said, look, every single week someone reaches out to me and they say something like this: learn how AI can optimize your finance cost by 70%, or learn how you can eliminate your accounts payables teams, or learn how you can eliminate your technology stack in favor of AI. So before I would ignore all of them, I would say, this is, I'm interested now, right? Like, I'm interested how you are going to reduce my finance cost by 70%. So I'm scheduling these calls over the next 2 weeks. I have 4 calls scheduled, and I want to try to learn how, because
Right.
there's always someone better, right? They do have a way to optimize cost
Yeah.
by seventy
Right.
percent. I'm going to listen and see how,
Right.
see how I can leverage that information internally. And if it's so good that
Yeah.
we need to do it tomorrow, then we will partner with that team and do the finance exercise internally. There is
Right.
something called Harvey for legal space.
Mm.
It effectively,
Yeah.
I call it, I don't want to eliminate, it's the wrong word, but it optimizes junior staff, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that Harvey does for the legal profession that would have taken hours, days, weeks to do in the past. Accounting's not there yet.
Got it.
Accounting will be there
Yeah.
maybe, hopefully, 18 months from now. And there will be an accounting version of
Got it.
Harvey. I don't know, call it Bob or Jennifer or whatever, right? That will do magical things for the accounting profession. It's just not there yet, or at least I
Got
haven't seen it. I do research on a regular
got
basis. I speak to people, and most of the finance professionals that I speak with regularly, it's more of a, what are you doing with it? I'm doing this. What are you doing with it? I'm doing that. There's not a or two, or there aren't modular solutions to install into
got it.
finance just yet.
Got it. Great. Thanks. I mean, I think basically your understanding about AI is really nice, really great because, and really applying Gemini, having that overall intent to know more about AI and how can apply AI into finance is the start because, I mean, there's a lot of talks all around. The people have kept on saying that, AI will not eat your job. People who know AI will eat your job, right? So it's very important to be in knowing what is happening in AI.
I have a network, a pretty large network in Russia and Ukraine. And the interesting thing is some of the highest paid jobs that are popping up in those two countries are AI prompt
Yeah.
engineers. Like, these
Okay.
jobs are more highly compensated than CEO jobs even. It's very interesting. And
Interesting.
when I was with Visa, and a lot of my Visa work was actually in Moscow, and I feel like folks outside of the US are a lot more pioneering from a technology space. They're the early adopters, and I believe we'll see adoption of finance driven AI outside of the US before we see it formally in the US.
I see. Interesting point. We'll see. Interesting point. Got it. So, Alex, I think let's move to the last question of the podcast, and this is a more personal question. And we have viewers viewing the podcast, and you have had experiences across industries. Have seen a lot of challenges, transformations. So, what would be your 2 to 3 pieces of advice for finance professionals or finance people for growing into becoming a finance leader?
It would really be advice that would hopefully work across all functions and industries. We go into the
Okay.
university today and we come out 4 years later using 5% of what we've learned. So, my advice, whether it's for high school or undergraduate or graduate, or even when you go into the new role, don't expect your education to come from the most expected path. You will meet someone in your undergraduate experience that is ahead above the rest. It may be a professor, for example. Maximize your time with that person. If you find a book as now a however old 35-year-old finance professional that resonates with you and that makes you better the next day, go find the next book by that same author, right? So this is related. Great things come from unexpected places, right? So again, it goes back to my original comment: keep the doors open, information will fly in, you get better, you get stronger as an individual. Number one. Number two, use that for the benefit of others, right? So there are folks from other disciplines that I speak to on a regular basis. I try to make their life better. I try to make their experience better. And so partner with people, you will get unexpected results, right? So number one, information intake. Number two, partnership. And number three, always be on the edge of the next development. So we talked about AI, right? We talked about finance, tech resources. Be learning about them all the time. This isn't like the 80s or 90s or whatever else. Like, all the stuff's on YouTube. You can learn whatever you want. You can research whatever you want. You
Yeah,
can connect with whoever you want. So if you're not successful, it's on you.
got it. Great, thanks. I think 3 points. One is, keep learning and go above the normal way of learning, a normal way of knowing about things. It can be a mentor, it can be your teacher, it can be a professor, it can be an author. Sticking to and identifying how you can, go ahead and upskill and educate yourself. The second aspect is partner with people. I also agree partnership is really important. Speaking with people, and sometimes what we believe is that we should do only what we want to do. I mean, what fits our goals and ambition and whatever we want to do. But I think partnership with people really helps because a, it gives you a different perspective about things. B, it also opens up to a lot of things that you did not know. And C, it just you just have a friend with you who can who can also guide you in your time, and it just increases the people that you can reach out to. And third is being at the edge of the next development. Very important because things change, times are changing, and it's changing really really rapidly, right? And it's very important to be on top of what you're doing. Right, right. Great, great, Alex. I think thanks for being a part of the podcast and sharing your insights. The one thing I loved about it, I didn't talk it, I kept it reserved for the last piece, is your customer empathy. You mentioned that understanding the customer requirements is very important, and you mentioned about going over and above, not only from a finance perspective. I think when you said that, what does this particular customer wants, right? It can be in terms of requirements, it can be in terms of the terms that you want to add. I think I loved your answer because it shows that you are thinking about going much beyond the general area of definition. You want a goal that this customer needs to be converted for your cash flows and all the goals come in setting. So the customer empathy is really nice and really lovely answer, because I believe if everybody has a customer first focus, then it really helps the company, because everybody is just working towards making the life of the customer. So love the answer. I think that was the biggest takeaway from me across the
Thank you for
podcast.
the kind words. This is educational for me in and of itself, because you ask questions that force my mind to think in different ways. And this has been a learning experience for me, just from hearing you and your background and your questions, and also having to think about my experience and putting things in perspective. So I appreciate this forum, and it's been super nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. So thank you everybody for joining into the podcast. See you for the
Thank
next
you.
podcast. Thank you everybody.